All right, so we're diving into NoFap today, huh?
Yeah, getting into it.
This video, this Hamza video, The Hidden Danger of NoFap, it's, I don't know.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, right, to process. It's
Right.
like, we hear so much about NoFap in terms of, like, discipline and, just, like,
Crushing it.
crushing it, yeah.
The benefits.
And he kind of comes in and just sort of flips the script.
Completely, yeah.
And I think what's interesting, too, is that he really does, I mean, you said this was going to be a deep dive, and he goes deep.
Oh, yeah.
Like, talking about his own struggles with it, being 17 years old, feeling addicted, like, he's really going there.
Absolutely. I mean, he talks about, this one point where he's in the kitchen with his family, and you can tell it's like, after a rough morning, as he kind of puts it. And that shame is just like eating away at him. He wants to disappear, And for anybody who has struggled with any sort of compulsive behavior, whether it's, this or something else, like that feeling is so...
Oh, instantly recognizable.
Like you're just like
Yeah,
alienated.
totally.
And that's where I think his critique of the NoFap, I guess, community, the approach, it really begins there.
Yeah, and it's not to say that, porn addiction isn't real or it can't be harmful.
Right.
But he's challenging the entire framework of how we approach it.
Yeah.
That whole emphasis on streaks and relapsing, he argues, can actually make it worse.
Totally, because it's like setting you up to fail in a way, right?
Exactly.
Because it's almost guaranteed that you are going to fail at some point. And it just feeds into that shame cycle that he was just talking about.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the difference between aiming for zero and constantly falling off the wagon, as they say.
Right.
Versus focusing on like gradual improvement.
Yeah, and he uses this analogy of like bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, when I first heard it, I was like, okay, where is he going with this? But then it kind of clicks.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't, walk into the gym for the first time and try to bench press your body weight, right?
Right.
That's how you get injured.
Right.
That's how you get discouraged.
Exactly.
He's like, why are we treating this any differently?
So instead of this all or nothing, it's more like what, like a volume control kind of thing?
Exactly, yeah. And he even points out that even in some, spiritual traditions that emphasize celibacy,
right,
this idea of balance is still present.
Okay.
It's not so black and white.
And that's kind of like radical to say in this, I feel like in the NoFap world.
Huge.
Because it's very much about this, like
abstinence.
Complete abstinence.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, that can actually backfire.
Big time. And he even goes so far as to say that some YouTubers benefit from that
interesting.
cycle of, striving and failing.
Right.
Keeps people coming back for more.
So he's saying don't buy into the hype because they're just trying to get you to, come back for more?
Yeah, he's not holding back on that point.
So what's the alternative? Like, if not NoFap, then what? Okay, so he says, and I'm just going to say it, FAP allowance.
I don't know about you.
It's definitely memorable.
It's like, when I first heard that, I was like, did he really just say that?
Right, yeah.
But then he kind of gets into it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's a little, shocking at first.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's taking that, volume control idea and putting it into practice.
Yeah.
Instead of, this nebulous goal of like, oh, I'll just try to do it less. He's like, no, let's set a number.
Yeah.
So like, if you're used to doing it every day,
right,
maybe aim for 25 times this month. Next month, aim for 20, whatever it is.
It's like hacking the system almost.
Exactly.
Like changing the definition of success.
Yeah.
It's not about like complete abstinence. It's just like, okay, gradual change.
Make these small.
Yeah. And I think that's where like the genius of the whole, allowance thing comes in.
Okay.
And it takes away some of the shame and the pressure.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so I went over my allowance this month.
Right.
It's not the end of the world.
It's not a failure.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll just, I'll adjust and I'll try again next month.
It's like what we always say, progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Right. You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And he even says, he's like constantly like stressing and worrying about this is probably more damaging than the act itself.
100%.
It's like, give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Like, you're human.
Yeah, you're not a failure.
Right.
You're a work in progress.
And I love that, like, self-compassion, because it's so easy to get into that shame spiral.
Absolutely. And he even talks about how, this hyper-focus on NoFap can almost become like a person's whole identity.
Oh, interesting.
Which can be, its own kind of trap.
Yeah.
He's talking about, people in his Discord, like, with usernames like, Dragon Slayer 69-day streak or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Really leading into that whole like warrior mentality.
So it's like you're defining yourself by what you're not doing.
Exactly. Yeah, and he's basically saying like that can be really unhealthy in the long run. You know, it's like you're putting all of your self-worth on this one thing.
On this one thing.
It's like setting yourself up for failure.
Totally.
You know, he's advocating for like a more holistic approach, you know, like let's build a healthy, happy life overall, not just fixate on this one thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just stop there, right? Like with just critiquing this approach.
He goes after other YouTubers.
Oh, yeah, he goes there.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not shy about it.
He is not.
Like at all.
No, he calls out, you know, what he sees as, you know, manipulative tactics.
Right.
Exaggerating the benefits of NoFap, making outlandish claims.
Like no.
Preying on people's insecurities for views.
Wow.
Basically.
It's kind of bold to call out like other people in your space, right?
It is. Yeah, he even says that, you know, he doubts most of them even follow their own advice.
Really?
Which is, you know.
That's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement.
Wow. So whether you agree with him or not,
yeah,
it's definitely something to think about, right?
It makes you think twice about, you know.
The motivations behind it.
Yeah, like who are you getting your information from?
Exactly.
And why are they telling you this?
Because we see this with like any kind of
self-improvement
stuff, right? It's like you have to be discerning.
Totally.
Especially online because anyone can be an expert, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So
and he's, you know, it's like he's kind of saying be wary of anybody who's selling you like a quick fix.
Right. Or like
or make you feel bad about not being perfect.
It's your journey.
It is.
You get to decide what success looks like.
Exactly.
So after all of this, like what do you think is like the biggest takeaway from his message? So much to unpack here, right? Like we went through his whole critique, the FAP allowance, everything.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting ideas.
For somebody who's listening right now and they're really like in it, right?
Yeah.
Struggling with this, what do you think like the core message is for them, from him?
I think more than anything, it's give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's so much shame
around this topic.
Around this, this whole like self-control thing with, you know.
With porn.
With porn and everything.
Yeah.
And he's offering a path of self-compassion instead.
Which I think is huge because it's like, you know, we get sold this thing of like, you got to have willpower. You got to be this like superhuman.
This robot,
who never, you know.
Never slips up.
Never slips up. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And he's kind of saying like, maybe it's okay to be human.
Exactly.
You know, and like figure out a way that you can, you know, manage these urges.
In a healthy way.
In a healthy, sustainable way.
Absolutely.
And it goes back to like, you know, progress, not perfection.
Totally.
Right? Like you're not going to...
Yeah, and that's, I think, the beauty of that whole shift.
Right.
From NoFap to, you know, he even uses the term less FAP.
Right, yeah.
It allows for those mistakes.
Yeah.
It acknowledges that you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
And that's okay.
And I think like a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right.
When it comes to like all the advice that's out there.
Oh, absolutely. And
it's people.
It's like, you know, information is power, but...
But you have to be discerning.
You have to be very discerning, especially online.
Because there are people who are selling...
Oh, yeah, selling a fantasy.
A fantasy. Yeah. And it's easy to get, like, you know, sucked into that.
Especially when you're feeling vulnerable.
Especially when you're feeling vulnerable. And, you know, it always comes back to what we say, like, it's your journey.
It is.
You get to decide what success looks like for you.
Absolutely.
What feels right for you.
And you're not alone in this.
Yes.
You know, it's so easy to feel isolated when you're dealing with something like this.
Yeah.
But, you know, the reality is there's tons of people.
So many people.
Going through very similar things.
Find your people. Find what works for you and, like, be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
I like that he leaves us with that question, too, of, like, identity.
Yeah.
You know, if you're, like, really deep in this world, this NoFap world, like, ask yourself, is this actually serving me? Or is it maybe time to, like, redefine my relationship with this?
Yeah.
It's something to think about